Turn it up, now we're back on air. Big games, big takes, yeah, we're going there. From the first hot mic to the final call. Nah, dog, sports show, talking ball. Headlines hitting, yeah, the day moves fast. We call the big shots, then we double back. From the fight nights, fairways, brackets too. Football Sundays, we're riding through. Win or lose, we still bring the heat. Talk it loud, keep it sharp, no retreat.
It's the Nard Dog Sports Show, where the ball takes roll. Game time, prime time, let the whole thing go. Yeah, the Nard Dog Sports Show, coming fast, talking goal. From the kickoff line to the final show.
All right. It is officially the kickoff of the 2026-2027 college football season. I'm here with Ryan. I'm here with Max. It's a Friday night in July, and we are pre-recording our college football preview content. We got NFL, we got college football we got to get through. So only way to get through all of it is to kind of pre-package it and pre-can some of it. But this will be getting released probably as one of the first shows that we actually start posting in August to the YouTube channel, to iTunes, all the podcast platforms. But tonight we are going to preview the Big 12. Look, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat shit. This is probably the conference that the three of us are the least passionate about in terms of our connectivity to the schools, our fandom, but I think it's a very fun conference. I think that it's a wide open conference pretty much year in and year out. We saw Arizona State win it when they were voted at the Big 12 Media Days to finish, I think, last or second to last a couple years ago. We've seen teams that have sky high expectations in this conference fall all the way down to the bottom of the standings by the end of the season, and vice versa, like I just mentioned with Arizona State. So the Big 12 is truly the wild, wild west, and we're here to kind of try to break it down for you the best that we can. Ryan, Max, how we doing, boys? You guys excited to start talking some college football and start with the Big 12 tonight?
Bourbon and ball, baby. I'm looking forward to football more than anything. Can't wait. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Just first real deep dive into college football today with the Big 12 breakdown, and it definitely got me pumped up.
Yeah, dude, it's fun. Like, we're all excited for football to come back, but when you really start reading about specific teams and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and especially with college football now, it's impossible to keep up with who everyone got in the transfer portal, who's turned weaknesses into strengths. And we're going to try to break it down for everyone on who these Big 12 teams now have on their rosters and where we think that some teams may have advantages over the others within the conference. Guys, let's jump into the Big 12 and the college football season. I think the only place you can start with the Big 12 preview is with the defending Big 12 champions and the talk of the college football world by and large for the last 3-4 months. It's the Texas Tech Red Raiders. We recently found out they won't have what they thought was going to be their stud quarterback, their answer to last year's problems in the college football playoff, and Brendan Sorsby. He has essentially taken himself out of college football. There was just too much noise, too much criticism, too much backlash to that local judge's decision to let him play. So he decided he was going to go try to get into the NFL supplemental draft. The supplemental draft ended up getting canceled. So he is now resigned to basically taking the year off, and he'll enter the regular NFL draft next year. It's a major hit to Texas Tech. They've got a really good roster, and they've got a good coach. They've spent a ton of money kind of building the infrastructure there in Lubbock. And Brendan Sorsby was going to be the connectivity piece, I think, that would have brought it all together. Now they're back to Will Hammond, who played a little bit for them last year. They potentially face much of the same challenges that they had last year when Baron Morton was under center and they got shut out to end their season against Oregon down in Miami in the college football playoff quarterfinal. So Guys, I read quite a bit about Texas Tech this week. I like a lot of what I'm hearing and reading, but I'm not ready to crown them as repeat champions. Ryan, I'm going to come to you here first. What have you made of what you've learned about Texas Tech in the last couple weeks, and where do you see kind of strengths and weaknesses for this team entering 2026, 2027?
I think they definitely have a very talented roster. I don't think you can argue that. They're bringing in people, they're bringing in talented guys in the transfer portal. I think they had 8 guys that were rated 4 stars in the portal. I'd said 6, so that was the highest of any Big 12 team I saw. So they're doing what they need to do to bring in the talent. But with the question at QB, it's just so hard for me to get behind them as just like the favorite to win the conference. It's the Big 12. You almost have to expect chaos. And I was absolutely shocked to see that they're plus 105 to win the Big 12 championship. You would think they have a stud quarterback, or they're Ohio State and they're just an absolute program. They've done it once. They didn't look super impressive to me. And with the questions they have at quarterback, with Will Hammond coming back from ACL, I think it's crazy. Do I think they're going to be a good team? I definitely do. I think they have a ton of talent, especially on that defensive line. I think that's probably their most talented unit. I think that's probably one of the most talented units in the Big 12 overall. And that's going to keep you in a lot of games. But with the questions at QB, I am going to be a hater on Texas Tech at those odds. That's for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. Max, what are your thoughts on the Red Raiders? Are you kind of in the same camp as Ryan in terms of not being sold on them as a basically even money favorite to win the conference again?
No, I'm absolutely with Ryan. I think the odds are terrible. I would have handicapped in my completely non-professional handicap skill set probably closer to 3 or 4 to 1, and had BYU and Utah probably right where they're at, much more bunched, if you will. I don't understand it. I mean, Will Hammond's coming off an ACL. They're trying to sell it like he's going to be ready for week 1. Everything I read is like that's pretty aggressive timeline to get your QB back. Does he really need to be there for week 1 when you're playing Abilene Christian? Then you go into Oregon State. It's like you could probably get away with those 2. But then week 3, we're looking at probably the biggest game of the year for them, Houston in Lubbock on a Friday night. You're going to have all the media, all the spotlight, and Houston is a bit of a sleeper team in this conference. So I would agree with Ron. It's a little crazy to me that the odds are that far apart between them and BYU and Utah's of the world. Listen, AJ Holmes, preseason Big 12 player of the year. He's a D tackle at the end of the day. I love D tackles, but I don't know that I've ever seen a D tackle win that award since Ndamukong Suh. It's been a long time, I feel like, on that front when we're seeing edge rushers, and especially a team like Texas Tech with David Bailey being there last year. They go into the transfer portal, they get an Adam Trick and Austin Romaine, some of these guys that can come in and supplement, but I don't know that you're going to replace David Bailey necessarily. So for me, yeah, I think it's a little crazy. They don't have the quarterback support that I would like to see when I'm picking a team to win a conference. They got a hell of a running back duo in Cam Dickey and Jacoby Williams. Those guys are going to combine for 5,000-6,000 total yards, it feels like. But I think they're going to lean on the run game a little bit heavier this year, and that's run game and defense is great in the NFL. It's great to some extent in college. But the Big 12, it feels like it's spread them out, score 40 a game, and I just don't see the Raiders doing it.
Casey, you've done a lot of the research and stuff. What player at Texas Tech this year excites you the most?
I love their tight end, Terrence Carter Jr. I think he goes by, or Terrence Carter the second, but he's a really good tight end. He didn't have a ton of touchdowns last year, but he was a pretty good high volume receiver for them. I think he caught north of 50 balls and about 600 to 650 yards. He's a really good tight end. I think he's a great security blanket for whoever is under center. And look, it probably will be Will Hammond eventually, it might not be at the start of the season. I think Max hit the nail on the head talking about Houston and that kind of being the date on the schedule that Texas Tech has to be circling to try to get Will Hammond back. It's a Friday night in Lubbock. Houston we'll get to, but Houston is going to be a very dangerous contender in this Big 12 race, I think, with all the talent and production that they have coming back. So if it's not Will Hammond, I think that there's a good chance that Kirk Francis, the transfer from Tulsa, who I believe was a 1 or 2 year starter at Tulsa, solid enough, has some experience, hopefully won't shit the bed too bad against Abilene Christian and Oregon State to start the season. If he can bridge the gap to that Houston game and they can get Will Hammond back, that would be good enough. Ideally, Will Hammond comes back for Oregon State, get some reps in before they host Houston on that Friday night in September. But I kind of went sideways on answering your question. Terrence Carter Jr., the tight end, he's one of my favorite players. I also love a couple of the transfers that they got. Austin Romaine is a stud linebacker from Kansas State. I believe he was either first or second team All Big 12 last year at Kansas State. He decided to come join the Red Raiders, probably got a bag dropped on him to come basically replace Jacob Rodriguez in the middle of that defense. I also love that they went and got first team All MAC player in Adam Trick, an edge rusher, to be there as a replacement for Romello Height and David Bailey. So I think the pass rush, they got another guy from San Diego State who should fill the other edge spot. So I love the way that they've plugged some of the holes on defense. I don't think that they're going to be quite as good on defense as they were last year, but I don't think we're going to see that defense fall off a cliff. I think that they've done enough in the portal. I think that they've developed talent enough on the defensive side of the ball. And look, this isn't the Texas Tech of the past where they're going to win games 63-56. This team can play defense. The defense is basically what took them to the college football playoff last year and the Big 12 championship last year. Sheil Wood is a pretty good defensive coordinator. They have the most or second most talent in the league on the defensive side of the ball. So defense, I agree with Max. I think the run game is going to carry them more this year. And that's the game, right? Talent, just raw talent, defense, run the ball.
Yeah, I look at their schedule too, Nard. You got Houston week 3, and that's it. I mean, there's not another team on there that scares me whatsoever if I'm Texas Tech. However, the flip side of that coin is you saw the success from last year. Obviously, Cody Campbell's pumping millions of dollars into this school. Everyone's probably a little bit butthurt in the Big 12, seeing that, hey, they're just buying rosters every year. They're the Miami of Texas, But at the same time, like, that's just how it is now. And you're ultimately becoming everybody's Super Bowl. So even if it's an easy schedule, some of these teams, I look at like Arizona State, Arizona, Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor's got DJ Lagway now. I mean, there are just some of those games that if they're not focused, they're not there, and it's your opponent's Super Bowl of that schedule of that season. I mean, there could be a slip. I don't necessarily see it though. I think they easily cruise to the Big 12 championship game.
Yeah, that's fair. It's the Big 12. There's losable games. There's landmines on the schedule. But the nice thing for Texas Tech is that pretty much all their toughest in-conference games are at home. Houston is at home. Arizona State is at home. Arizona is at home. TCU is at home. The only road games they have this year, Oregon State, Colorado, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and Baylor. There's no real kind of scary roster of that group of 5 games. So they should be favored in all 5 of their road games, probably by double digits. So all their toughest challenges they're going to face in the friendly confines of Lubbock, Texas. And I think that works in their favor. And like you said, they won't see BYU or Utah till the very end of the season in the Big 12 championship in Dallas, potentially.
Yeah. Imagine 5 years ago, 10 years ago, saying Texas Tech is the best team in the conference because of their defense.
Yeah.
I mean, that just sounds like,
right?
Yeah. Somebody would look at you in the bar and say, you're a fucking idiot.
I have one more question for both you guys about Texas Tech. Two guys have already been mentioned, David Bailey, Jacob Rodriguez, both gone. They also lost Lee Hunter, Romello Height, and Caleb Douglas. That's 5 guys drafted in the top 3 rounds from Texas Tech. 9 guys drafted overall. This isn't Ohio State. This isn't Georgia or Alabama. Do they have the pipeline with the transfers and the money to just lose 9 guys and lose 5 guys in the top 3 rounds of the draft and just not really skip a beat?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because I think within the context of their own league, yeah, they are the Ohio State, they are the Georgia, they are the Miami or Clemson. They are the team that is going to reload and through the portal primarily, but they're getting good high school kids too now. I mean, because they're paying to get 5 stars, 4 stars. They're competing with Texas and Texas A&M because they've got that basically blank checkbook. So I think within the context of the Big 12, yeah, they are that big swinging dick that's just going to reload. Every year now, it's like, their top 3 offensive line room, top 3 defensive line room, top 3 linebackers, number 1 receiver group. Like within the context of the Big 12, yeah, they're buying the most talent and they are able to reload as well as anyone in that league. So I don't think they're going to be as good. I think Brendan Sorsby would have given them a ceiling that was a little bit higher than they had last year because they were limited at quarterback with Baron Morton. Without Sorsby, I think they're just going to be a good Big 12 team. But yeah, Texas Tech is that team now.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. You got Cody Campbell, you got Pat Mahomes, billionaire, a guy that makes, has a $500 million contract plus endorsements. I mean, they have so much money to throw at these kids. They're building new facilities, all this different stuff. I think of, he got game when he went to Texas State or whatever, and they're bringing women in and they're doing all this stuff. I mean, I think it's getting a little crazy at Texas Tech. They're just throwing money around and who knows what else. These kids are like, yeah, I'd love to come to Lubbock in the middle of nowhere. Nobody gives a shit about that place. But if you're going to pay me that kind of money and surround me with this kind of talent, yeah, okay. I'll come play ball for you.
Guys, we need to move on. Let's move on to the teams that are kind of right behind Texas Tech in terms of odds boards to get to the college football playoff to win the Big 12. That would be BYU and Utah, the 2 participants of one of the most underrated rivalry games, I think, in college football, the Holy War. Let's start with BYU. I really like this BYU team. I feel like I've read enough Phil Steele now for the last 10, 15 years that I can kind of pick up when he's trying to drop hints that he really likes a team. And he mentions in his preview magazine multiple places this year that he talked to Kalani Sitake this spring, and he is pretty confident this is BYU's best roster, best team that Sitake's ever had out there in Mormon country. So I really like what BYU has coming back. I thought they were a pretty good team last year. They had a freshman quarterback and they were going against, a lot more NFL players in Texas Tech, but Texas Tech is the only team that beat them, hammered them twice. But BYU's got a lot coming back from that team last year. They've added some guys that should help them be a little bit better in some weak spots from last year. Max, I'll come to you here first. What do you got on the Cougars, the Soakers of BYU?
I'm telling you, I put this in the suggestion box already. We need to change the name from BYU Cougars to the BYU Super Soakers. And then everybody gets to bring Super Soakers into the stadium and it just gets to be a wet and wild party. I think that'd probably be the most raucous, amazing college football environment. Imagine all the chicks. You got to show up in white. We got Super Soakers. It's just an absolute phenomenal scene. Hopefully my daughters don't listen to this later in life. But listen, I love BYU. I think plus 600, I may hammer that preseason. I look at their roster. I mean, LJ Martin's not only best player in Big 12, he's probably one of the best players in the country. Bear Bachmeier, I mean, freshman quarterback, wins 12 games, just takes a team that was on the rise but hadn't really got over the hump yet, puts them on his back, literally and figuratively. Bruce Mitchell, one of the best centers in the country, anchoring the offensive line. Then you go out and you get Cade Oluwabe, linebacker from Cal, who's All-American preseason, All Big 12. You still got ballers like Satuala at safety. I mean, listen, the only question mark in this whole thing is wide receiver for BYU. And the reality is between LJ Martin and Bear Bachmeyer, they're going to run for fucking 35 touchdowns. So I love this team. I mean, Kalani Sitake, incredible coach. We saw Penn State go after him. It was one of those things where he showed his loyalty to the Super Soakers, and everybody surrounded him and loved him for it. And I think it just galvanized that entire campus and following and the entire Mormon religion. So I am a humongous BYU guy. I may even try soaking this year. I don't know. I mean, that's how big I am on BYU. I think they're going to win the Big 12. My biggest thing, I look at the schedule, October 17th, Notre Dame coming to town. And then you got Utah at Utah, November 7th. So while they don't play Texas Tech middle and late in the season, they've got some big games that'll be difficult. We talked about Texas Tech having an easy schedule. I think BYU's got some harder work to do, but boy, oh boy, I would love to see BYU get another shot at Texas Tech. And I think this team gets it done.
Interesting. Okay. Little spoiler for kind of our Big 12 best bets at the end of the pod. But Ryan, where are you at on BYU and what you've read and learned about them?
Not quite as high as Max on BYU, but I do really like them. I love LJ Martin. This is his fourth year. He has 3 straight years where he's almost averaging 5 yards a carry. The last 2 years, he's averaged over 5 yards a carry. His freshman year, he was just under. I think it was like 4.7 or 4.8. He's an absolute stud. Not only that, he catches the ball almost three or 4 times a game out of the backfield. I really, really like him. He might be my favorite player in the whole Big 12, honestly. So they will really lean on him, I think, a lot this year. Max brought up another point. That Notre Dame game is going to be absolutely massive for them. If they're able to get that win, I don't see what stops them from making the college football playoff. I really don't. Besides that, obviously, Utah is a huge matchup. But when it comes down to it, BYU has the continuity of their head coach coming back, where Utah lost their coach. And I know they hired within the DC that's been there forever, but they still had multiple guys leave, follow Whittingham to Michigan. I really do like BYU a lot overall. I don't know if they will be my definite pick to win the conference, but just on a pure odds basis, them at 6-1 compared to Texas Tech at even money. I think that's just an absolute no-brainer. And I also do think that Max brought up another point with Ulave. He's a stud. I remember watching him at Cal. I was actually somewhat surprised he ended up at BYU, but I think he has, some ties to the Polynesians. But I really like this team. I love Martin. I will be placing some prop bets on him, I think.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. At 6-1 versus even money, BYU is a no-brainer for me. I think that there's some other teams I'm considering for a Big 12 championship ticket, but I really like this BYU team. I love that Phil Steele in his preview magazine, he's got them as the 3rd most experienced team in the country, first in the Big 12. They are 14th in the country in homegrown production, talent, retention, if you will. So they're not a very heavy transfer portal team. That being said, they've brought in some key pieces like Walker Lyons from USC at tight end, Cade Uvalde. He's a really good linebacker. I think he was like 2nd, 3rd, maybe honorable mention all ACC last year at Cal. He should help that defense quite a bit. They're in the middle at the linebacker spot. They brought in a former high recruit in Kyle Casper from Oregon. He's a receiver that I think he had some injuries and just kind of got passed by at Oregon, but They've got a weak receiver room. He should be able to come in and really be a weapon for them on the outside. And Bear Bachmeyer needs weapons. They lose Chase Roberts. They lose another guy, a medical red shirt in Cody Hagan. So the one spot that worries me about BYU is, are they dynamic enough on the outside? Do they have the receivers that can consistently get separation and beat guys off the ball in the Big 12? I think the line of scrimmage and the running game will help because teams are going to have to put extra guys in the box to stop LJ Martin. I think that there's just no glaring weakness on this roster. They've got a top 3 coach in the league. I think it's hard to argue against Sataki and his track record. And I just want to read one excerpt from the Athlon Sports Preview magazine. The anonymous Big 12 coach that gave his scouting report on BYU, he says, at the line of scrimmage, they look totally different than any other Big 12 team. I think this program is about to skyrocket. This is the year that they'll get over the top. If they don't this year, I don't know that they ever will. And I agree with the first part, that this program is about to skyrocket because of the money that they're about to get pumped into the program. BYU's got money. The Mormon Church has money, and they've got a lot of wealthy donors. The owner of the Jazz and the Mammoth, Ryan Smith, he was instrumental in bringing AJ DeBansa into the basketball program. And I think he's about to pump a ton of money along with some other wealthy boosters and donors that they have out there in Utah. I think this program is about to skyrocket. I don't think it's this year or bust necessarily, but I do think that this is a year that they have a lot of runway and a lot of opportunity to get over the hump, to get into the Big 12 championship, to win the Big 12 championship, and to get into the college football playoff. They are probably the team that realistically could go and play one of the big boys from the Big 10, from the SEC, and not get totally bullied on the line of scrimmage like some other Big 12 teams would.
Yeah, I'm full agreement with you, Nar.
The only thing else I would have to say is, with that anonymous quote and with what you guys are saying and the hints that Phil Steele seemed to drop, that Casey picked up on, it kind of makes sense why Shiitake turned down the Penn State job. If this is his best chance and he's very committed to BYU and building that into a powerhouse program, it makes sense why he did that. This is a big year.
So yeah, I think BYU, I love seeing what's going on there. I love that they're getting the funding. I love that they're keeping coaches there. It's not just a carousel like we see everywhere else, especially with the NIL stuff. So, but listen, they're not the only team in town that's a contender. We got the Utah Utes. Now, granted, leave it to me to blow my wad as talking about the Soakers here as my favorite to win, but Utah certainly got quite the resume, quite the team, and realistically their schedule lines up pretty well as well. So let's jump into them. And Casey, I'll send it to you first to just kind of see, what do you think? I mean, they bring a lot of people back from an offensive perspective, but I'm interested to get your take there.
I like Utah. Look, Kyle Whittingham is a coach that I've had a ton of respect for really the last 10, 15 years, and someone that I think is truly one of the most underrated coaches in college football. I hate that he's in Ann Arbor. We'll talk a lot more about him when we do our Big Ten preview. He's now Ryan's boy, and good for Michigan to go out and replace butter knives with a real head coach who should be able to turn things around in Ann Arbor fairly quickly. That being said, from what I'm reading, I like what I'm reading about Morgan Scalley, and he's a Utah lifer. I like what they have on their roster. I really like their quarterback, Devin Dampier. I like his backup and kind of change of pace quarterback that they throw in there, and Bird Ficklin. Their running back, Wayshawn Parker. That Utah BYU game is November 7th in Salt Lake City. BYU at Utah for the Holy War. That's going to be, I think, one of the best games of the year in all of college football, not just the Big 12. But I love the Holy War. I make a point to try to watch it every year. If Ohio State's playing at the same time, or there's another kind of top 10 matchup that is drawing my attention away from it, I try to go back and watch the highlights. But Utah, BYU, if they're both healthy, if they're both performing up to the expectations that I think a lot of people have for them this year, I think that November 7th game could basically be a de facto play-in game into the Big 12 championship. I really like what Utah has, and I'm really interested to hear if you guys are aligned with me and like what you're seeing and hearing about Utah now too.
Somewhat there with you. I do like Utah, but I just think there's a lot of unknowns. They have a first-year offensive coordinator, a first-year head coach. They lost a decent amount, transferred out. I know a couple guys followed Whittingham to Michigan, and John Henry Daly, I believe, and a stud cornerback. So they definitely lost some guys, but what they do have working for them, I think, is they have a stud QB. I really think that Devin Dampier, I think he's somewhat the only person really that is standing in the way from me going all in on BYU, like Max is Devin. I think he's really good. I think he's better than Bear. And I think he might be the difference come November 7th in the Holy War. Like you said, Casey, they have a running game. They have the fronts on the offense and defensive sides to match up with BYU. Some of the other teams in the conference just don't. And when they do, I think it could come down to quarterback play and guys on the outside who's able to make a play here or there. And when it comes down to that, I think I just like Utah a little more than BYU.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Listen, I actually am on the other side of the fence of you two on Devin Dampier. I think, yes, he's super talented. He's your prototypical college quarterback that will never make it in the NFL. Now, I know that doesn't matter for what we're talking about today, but the guy had 2,500 yards passing last year, 24 touchdowns, 5 picks. Now he ran for 835 yards and 10 touchdowns, but inconsistency with the deep ball, inconsistency with getting through progressions, doing protection commands, all these things that you kind of hear about that were holding him back. I don't know if he makes those improvements going into this year. I mean, he's been there for a couple of years now. You would think that these things are coming in. You got Bird Ficklin coming in. How are they going to use him more too, right? Like he is obviously came out of high school playing all sorts of different positions. He's going to do the same here, line up at QB some. I'm not as sold on the Utes. I agree with Casey. The Holy War is going to be awesome. It's always a great game. It's always just a battle. Morgan Scally, old Scallywag coming in here, being a Ute for life and finally taking over the reins. Quite frankly, it's a lot of pressure. I look at Kyle Whittingham not on the sidelines, and it's like Nick Saban not being at Alabama. It just feels weird. And frankly, I think we're about to find out is what they built because of one coach or one culture, as they like to think, right? So I think they've really got to get more out of the run game. They averaged a pretty good clip in yards per carry, and I think Wayshawn Parker ended with 4 straight 100-yard games. But at the same time, 981 rushing yards, 6 TDs. That basically tells me that Devin Dampier is doing it all. And I look at my super soakers over at BYU, and I feel like Kalani Sitake and Kelly Papinga are really going to shut down Dampier or focus on him more and make Utah beat them other ways when they do play. So listen, the Utes are good. They bring back some folks. They've got a decent looking schedule. They're kind of rebuilding the offensive line. There's defensive line turnover. I trust the trenches, and BYU, I feel a lot more confident at BYU, especially plus 600 versus I think plus 800 for Utah. Give me the Super Soakers over Utah in the Holy War overall. I'm going to spoil my pick again. I just think that Utah comes up a little bit short, and even Texas Tech, I think will end up being better than Utah.
One thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned earlier, Texas Tech had 6 4-stars come in, and that was the most I saw of any Big 12 program. Utah had 5 4-stars leave, which was also the most I saw of any Big 12 program. And I know a couple of them were younger guys that were freshmen that came in that just transferred to Michigan. I just thought that was a lot to lose for a program like Utah that in the past has seemed to be a guy or two short here or there.
They're on the wrong side of the money in the Holy War. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I think you guys both hit the nail on the head. To me, the crux of the Utah Utes this year is going to be on the line of scrimmage and what they do to replace their stud offensive tackles that both got drafted and how they rebuild that defensive line. If Scally gets that defensive line in order and they kind of shore up some of the issues that they had stopping the run last year and they find some good offensive linemen that are solid, I think Dampier and Parker can carry this team a long way and potentially beat a BYU team in Salt Lake City in November. Their toughest Big 12 road game is probably at the very end of the year against TCU. They have Houston at home. They have BYU at home. They have back-to-back games against Arizona and TCU on the road in November. So that's where their season is going to come together or fall apart, is kind of right in that Halloween, Thanksgiving era, which is where a lot of teams, their season is made.
Okay, I agree with those points you made on Utah, Casey, but let's move on to one of those other contenders right in that same range. We got the Houston Cougars, and I know Max has taken a little bit of a liking to this team, so I'm going to throw it to him first and see what Max has on this Houston team.
Yeah. So listen, I think Houston is a little bit of a dark horse. I kind of like what they're doing. They bring back a ton of starters. I think it was over 32,000 snaps that they bring back on this roster. You got Willie Fritz still at the helm at head coach entering year 3. Year 3 is typically that point in college football where you're really getting your recruits in. Now I know NIL's changed that a lot, but it's getting recruits, it's getting your program built, it's getting your systems really ingrained in what everybody does there, getting used to it, etc. I think what he's done as a head coach, 7 conference championships, 8 10-win seasons. He turned around Tulane, he turned around Georgia Southern. Now he's turning around Houston. I look at the personnel and head coach and the coordinator spot, but then what they bring back, Connor Wegman, he was absolutely outstanding last year. 25 passing TDs, 11 rush TDs. He gives them some real stability at the QB position. Amari Thomas is one of the best wide receivers in the Big 12. They've got Shadre Hurst. He's one of the top guards in the country. And then not to mention Mekhi Hughes, who's the last 2 years has gone 1,300 or basically 1,400 yards both years. So, they just have talent everywhere. They've got experience everywhere, which I like even more. And that is something that I think in the Big 12 specifically, and we'll kind of talk about it with turnover in some of these lower tier teams, but the NIL portal and how much turnover Texas Tech has had for the better in some instances, but they still have to gel. They still have to get up to speed and have that cohesive aspect to it. You look at a team like Houston, they are the epitome of Big 12, shock the world on any given Saturday. QB wide receiver duo, they're probably top in the conference, I would say. And then they've got a lot of people on defense that are proven commodities. So when I look at Houston as a whole, what they bring back, it's experience, it's who they have at the helm. Willie Fritz knows ball. And I think they're going to be an absolute sleeper contender. Everyone's going to literally sleep on the Houston Cougars. I look at their schedule. They've got Texas Tech week 3 on a Friday night at Texas Tech. They get through that with a win, all of a sudden trajectory is up and to the right. Now, even if they lose, they go through the rest of their cake schedule until October 24th. They go at Utah. Those are still games that they can win those games even though they're on the road. And all they really have to do is win one and then not fumble the rest. And they can still get to a Big 12 championship. So I just like Houston. They're kind of my sleeper pick, if you will. They're not one of the big 3, but I do think that they could come out and plus 16, plus 1,700. That's worth a little sprinkle.
Yeah. I don't need to repeat a lot of what you just said, but I'm there with you, man. I think Houston, like BYU, they're in the top 10 in Phil Steele's experience chart nationally in terms of what they have coming back. They have a ton of starts on their offensive line. I believe they're in the top 10 in number of career offensive line starts they have coming back. Now, some of that is transfer portal, and the offensive line needs to come together and gel and actually play together, prove that the individual pieces turn into a cohesive unit. The sum of the parts is as good as the parts themselves. They've got a true shutdown corner in Will James. They're strong on both lines of scrimmage. And Willie Fritz, I agree with you. He's a winner. The guy won at Tulane. He's winning here. Connor Wegman, has true, I think he started 10 to 15 games at Texas A&M before transferring here last year. So they're good to very good in all the most important places. 9-3 last year. They were 7-1 heading into their ninth game of the year. Lost a really weird game to a bad West Virginia team as a 12-point favorite at home, and then lost a tough one a couple weeks later to TCU on the road by a field goal. So they were probably a couple, plays here and there from potentially being 11-1 last year. Their only real loss being a pretty decisive one against Texas Tech. But, can they improve upon that and get to 10-2, 11-1 and put themselves firmly in the Big 12 title race come November? I think they can. Their schedule is out there with Utah and BYU. So yeah, give me Houston to be in the mix all day come November. I think they've got the pieces, and I think they've got the experience, and they've got the coach and the program stability now to not have a weird kind of West Virginia 12-point favorite loss at home again this year. I think they'll more steady and they'll be in the thick of things come November in the Big 12 title race. Ryan, what do you got on Houston?
I don't have too much to add. I really like Willie Fritz as a coach. I was trying to look at different angles on some of these teams. One thing I looked at that I thought was kind of interesting was they had the 20th highest percent of returning yards coming back on offense. So they obviously have a lot of continuity. They had no major transfers out. So something that they're doing there is they're bringing everyone back, and everyone seems to be staying. It also surprised me that Houston didn't have any major transfers in. They had no 4-stars in, no 4-stars out. That was somewhat shocking to me, just because I think Houston, I still think like big oil money. I don't know if they have the boosters that are necessarily backing that up. The one thing that stuck out to me, especially more than the top end of the Big 12, is they seem to be bringing back a lot, and they didn't seem to really lose anything to the transfer portal.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I think that brings us to our next team. I think we can probably lump in, kind of Arizona State, Kansas State. These three teams are probably the next group of three that people seem to be looking at as potential dark horses in the Big 12 title race. I'm going to go ahead and kind of pivot us to Arizona first. Noah Fafita is coming back. Brett Brennan had an incredible rebound in year 2 last year. Arizona is another team in the Big 12. They've got good experience. They're 29th in Phil Steele's experience coming back. So good, not great. Like Houston and BYU, but Noah Fafita is potentially the player of the year in the conference. I think he is a stud and just really a difference maker for the Arizona Wildcats. I think Arizona and Arizona State are both going to be incredibly interesting this year. But Ryan, Max, any thoughts, predictions, anything on Arizona that you guys want to touch on quickly?
No, I look at what you talked about with Brent Brennan and even Seth Dogie, I think is how you pronounce it. But what they did, I mean, the offense went up 44 spots from 2024 to 2025. Noah Fafita coming back, redshirt senior, all Big 12, threw for 3,229 TDs. They've got Trey Spivey, which it just seems like the most incredible stat line to me. The guy caught 23 balls and had 7 touchdowns. Like the math on that just doesn't typically math. So I would be trying to get him 100 catches this year if I'm Seth. But I mean, honestly, I look at this group, like the front 7 has some real talent. Tay Brown, 8.5 tackles for loss last year, 93 tackles. And Danny Gonzalez is moving these guys around all the time. kind of a chess piece, confusion aspect. So I think Arizona, again, they're typical Big 12 in my book. And I say that in the sense of, listen, they're going to get tested early. BYU week 2, they're at BYU, and then they're kind of fluff of the schedule, and then they get tested late at Texas Tech on Halloween, Utah November 14th. So, if they find a way at BYU, we're probably talking about Arizona a hell of a lot more. But I mean, I think they take an L there, and then, they may be 5-6 wins by the time that Halloween game rolls around against Texas Tech. And it's another gut check for them. And they're going to have to win that one if they lose the BYU one. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Arizona is one of those teams that will certainly find out a lot more as the season goes on versus, especially if they lose that BYU game up front.
Yep. Ryan, anything on the Wildcats?
Not a whole lot. I do think Nova Fida is a great bet for offensive player of the year or some props in the Big 12. I think he could have a huge year. I actually think that I might be a little ahead of myself, and I don't truly believe in this totally, but I could see him getting a little dark horse Heisman hype at some point in the season.
Ooh.
And then it fading when they have a disappointing loss. Because I don't
Week
fully
2?
buy. Yeah, it could be. I don't fully buy into Arizona. I don't fully buy into Fafita, but he is one of those guys where every time I watch him, he does a few things where I'm like, damn, that's that. He looks pretty fucking good there. So that would be my thing to add on Arizona, that I think Fafita might get a little dark horse Heisman action at some point during the season.
Yep, and I had a highlight in the Athlon Sports anonymous opposing Big 12 coach scouting report. I wanted to read a little excerpt from the opposing Big 12 coach who did a scouting report on Arizona for Athlon. He says, quarterback Noah Fafita is freaking electric. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. His off-schedule playmaking ability is unbelievable. When he gets flushed out of the pocket, the play begins. So that kind of quote gets me excited and gets me probably overinflated on a team in terms of what their true ceiling is. But, you get just a crazy playmaker like Noah Fafita in a crazy volatile league like the Big 12. Guys, I'm telling you, I'm starting to get a little hot and heavy on Arizona as a flyer, as a dark horse pick. They've got potentially the best player in the league, and at the most important position, they got a good coach, and I like the Wildcats.
Listen, I like Noah Fafita too. I think the big thing with him is, like you mentioned, when he kind of gets flushed out, the off-scheduled stuff, the arm angle, it's like he's got a little of that Cam Ward in him. If things aren't looking good in the pocket, just kind of pop out real quick, find somebody downfield, not afraid to throw across his body. So I think I'm with you on that. I think the Heisman talk listen, it's one of those flyer picks, right? We're kind of playing the long odds on that, I'm sure. But Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, I think is pretty juicy, frankly, especially if they win at BYU week 2.
Yeah, and Casey being as positive on Arizona and just looking at 22-1 to win compared to plus 105 for Texas Tech and having what I think is clearly the better quarterback, I'm going to place a bet like that all day over just even money. I think that's insane.
Yeah, you look at Big 12, you're playing value all day, right? It is truly the anything can happen conference. I think that's 22-1, something like that, versus even money. I would put my money on Arizona before I did Texas Tech. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm right there with you.
Yep. Let's move on to their rival, the Kenny Dillingham-led Arizona State Sun Devils. One of the teams in this league that has really had almost a complete roster overhaul. They are 120th in the country out of 138 teams on Phil Steele's experience chart. They're 14th in the conference. So there's two teams that are even worse than them in terms of experience coming back. But, obviously the big loss is Sam Levitt, their quarterback the last couple of years, who took them to the playoffs with Scadaboo a couple years ago. He is now going to be the quarterback at LSU for Lane Kiffin. They bring in Cutter Boley, the quarterback from Kentucky. That's where I remember him from, is seeing him play a little bit in the SEC for the Kentucky Wildcats. He's okay. They also have Mikey Keene, who was a starting quarterback in the Mountain West at Fresno State and then ended up transferring to Michigan and kind of sat behind Bryce Underwood last year for the Michigan Wolverines. He left Michigan. He's now on Arizona State. So another veteran who has some experience playing high-level college football, but isn't necessarily a game changer. They did bring in some game changers out wide for these new quarterbacks to throw to, whoever wins that job. They bring in Omarion Miller from Colorado. They bring in Reed Harris from Boston College, a big 6'5" guy who's a stud. They've got a pretty good running back in Kyson Brown, who is going to be needed to replace Raleek Brown on the ground this year. But look, everywhere you look on this roster, they're adding in new pieces. They're going to need guys who have not been in Sun Devil helmets previously to step up and help get this team to where they want to be, which is back in Big 12 title contention. I think Kenny Dillingham is an exceptional coach. There's a reason that Michigan was very interested in him before they landed on Willingham. But he's got his coordinators, third season for the offensive coordinator, Marcus Arroyo, fourth season for the defensive coordinator, Brian Ward. So he has his main staff back with him. And Dillingham's one of the best young coaches in the game. He was an overtime play away from getting into the Final Four of the college football playoff a couple years ago with Levitt and Scadaboo. So yeah, I'm not ever going to write off Arizona State until I see them really not come together and lose some games that you would have thought they would win. But anything from you guys on Dillingham, on Arizona State, can be more general, or anything I missed in terms of the roster makeup this year?
I don't have a lot on the roster makeup. They obviously have lots of holes, and with Levitt leaving, that's a big one. Dillingham kind of rubs me the wrong way. I was very, very, very happy that he seemed to be the one that tell Michigan he's not interested, because he's different and not as bad, but he's got a little PJ Fleck in him, if you know what I mean. And the way he talks about how he's going to build Arizona State into this powerhouse and stuff, it just really makes me want to root against him. And I'm so happy I don't have to pretend that I like this guy at Michigan. He's a good football coach, and I don't want to doubt him. But looking at their schedule at BYU, at Texas Tech, and at Texas A&M, I think those are 3 losses right there. And then you have other, tough games, the rivalry against Arizona and other Big 12 games, which with what they have coming back, I'm not very confident in this team at all. This is a team that I'm looking at. They're under for win totals, and I might be betting more with my heart and just rooting against Dillingham at this point, but that's where I'm at on Arizona State.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you, Ryan. Listen, the douche meter on Kenny Dillingham is definitely redlining. He's a little too confident in some instances. I know you got to be confident as a football coach, but buddy, there's one thing you calling your shot, and there's another thing where you went 6-3 in conference and 8-5 overall last year, and you had the Sam Levitts, you had the Jordan Tysons, you had the playmakers that you lost all of, and you didn't really replace them. You replaced them with nobodies. Nobody gives a shit about Cutter Boley and Reed Harris. It's like we've got an infatuation with 6'5" guys with a catch span of a double wide garage. I don't understand. I think the whole thing with Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State, to your point, Ryan, 3 automatic losses. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose to Arizona at the end of the season too, and lose more conference games than they did last year. I don't see them being relevant this year. I think when you look at the experience metrics that Casey brought up, there's something to be said about that. You can't have that kind of turnover and just flip it between April and August. Like, it doesn't happen, especially when you're going to, Texas A&M and Kyle Field week 2, you're going to get waxed. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Arizona State is a fraud. Kenny Dillingham can kick rocks, and yeah, they'll be irrelevant.
All right, well, that brings us to the TCU Horned Frogs. Ryan, I'm going to come to you first. We're starting to get into the middle of the conference, and some of these teams, it's really hard to pick up on where we think that they're going to be. But I know that TCU holds a special place in your heart from the college football playoff loss that Michigan suffered to the Horned Frogs a few years ago. Any thoughts on TCU and their team this year?
Yeah, Sonny Dykes and the Horned Frogs, the only team to get a win against future NFL MVP JJ McCarthy. And I still have nightmares of the pick six that night. I was at a New Year's Eve wedding with about 50 Ohio State buddies, and got to experience the loss with all them that night. So TCU will always have a special place in my heart because of that. But this year, I mean, it's more of the same from what I saw. They seem to have a talented group of DBs. They are led by
Jamel Johnson.
Jamel Johnson, yeah, he's a stud. All Big 12 preseason. They have some holes, definitely. Overall, I'm not super high on TCU. They have the quarterback coming in from Harvard is a bit of a question mark what he can do at this level. But I do believe in Sonny Dykes. Unlike Kenny Dillingham, this is a guy that I feel is the exact opposite, kind of no bullshit, gets it done, and a guy that I want to buy into. Looking at what they have coming back and looking at their production, it doesn't blow you away, but I still do believe in TCU overall. So even though I don't have a ton of expertise to add, I'm just going to add that I buy in on Sonny Dykes and what he's going to be able to do with these guys this year.
Yeah, fair enough. Marsh, what have you picked up on regarding the old Horny Frogs?
The old Horny Frogs at TCU. So listen, Texas Christian, Jaden Craig coming in, replacing Josh Hoover. Obviously, losing Josh Hoover is a big hit. He was kind of the heart and soul of that team, and I think bringing in a Harvard kid may raise your GPA. I don't know that he's raising the touchdown level that you're missing with Josh Hoover. But for me, I mean, Sonny Dykes is the epitome of the Big 12. He's a great coach. He does a lot of good things. He's had 57 all Big 12 selections, 13 NFL draft picks. They went to a random national championship against Georgia a couple years back. But realistically, that's going to be the biggest thing that he ever does. I would bet my retirement account on it that he will never go back to a national championship with TCU. I think the QB situation is going to be probably the downfall for them. I like Gordon Samus. He's an offensive line guy. I look at my team in Miami Hurricanes and what Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal have done and building it around the trenches. I've seen that be successful. I think that that's a right mindset to have, is to kind of build that out build it from an inside out perspective. But it's going to take time as well. Maybe Dan Orlovsky signed off on Gordon Samus being a former UConn guy coming over to a bigger program, trying to do bigger things. But I just don't see any of this success coming this year. And it'll be interesting to see kind of where Sonny Dykes goes from here, to be completely honest. I think there are probably some question marks if he has a lackluster year.
Yep. Yeah, all good points by both of you.
I gotta push back on that. Where is TCU going to go that's better than Sonny Dykes if he has a bad year this year? He took them to the national championship game a couple years ago. We're talking about TCU.
I said question marks. I said question marks. I didn't say he was going to get fired. But if he doesn't do well this year, and they're talking we're looking at a 500 season or maybe just over 500. I think going into the following season, there's going to be high expectations. There's going to be conversations. Sonny, what happened to that national contender we had? It's been all downhill since, all negative momentum. I don't think it's after this season. I think the national championship appearance gives him benefit of the doubt for a few years. But at the end of the day, you look at what the NIL is doing, it's going to change some of this college football landscape into more of an NFL we need to win now mode. And I think you're going to see coaches that aren't going to last as long because they went to a natty 2, 3, 4, or 5 years ago. It doesn't have the same gravity that it did before.
Yeah. I think I agree. I'm more on Ryan's side than I am Max's there. Sonny Dykes is a good football coach. Like a lot of these Big 12 teams, he's dealing with a lot of roster turnover and probably a more limited NIL funding vehicle than a lot of the top of the Big 12 counterparts in Texas Tech and BYU, and then surely the top of the Big 10 and the SEC hierarchy. He's probably playing with a little bit less of a full deck than some of the top teams in this league and in the country, but I think he's a good football coach. He went to the national championship. He had one bad year where they went 5-7 a few years ago, and then he's had back-to-back 9-4 seasons. So, national championship and 2 9-4 seasons, 3 out of 4 years. Like I don't know what more you can expect at TCU than that kind of relevancy. So they'll keep him around. Now that being said, TCU they do need to kind of clean up some things from last season. They were way too penalized, one of the more penalized teams in the Big 12. Their defense seemed to fall apart towards the second half of games. I think they gave up a lot more points in the fourth quarter of games than they did in the first quarter of games. So it seemed like either the defense was breaking down and then guys just didn't have the conditioning or were just kind of wearing down as the game went on, or offensive coordinators were just figuring out the scheme as the game went on and where to kind of push and find the weaknesses. So they gotta clean some things up. They have a really tough schedule this year. They open the season in Dublin against Bill Belichick and the North Carolina Tar Heels. They embarrassed North Carolina to start last season on that Monday night of Labor Day. So I think North Carolina is certainly going to have that game circled as a revenge opportunity. I think North Carolina will be a challenge in Dublin in week 0. They have to go at UCF. They have to play BYU at home. They go to Tucson to play at Arizona. I mean, their last 4 games of the season are at Arizona, Kansas State, Utah, at Texas Tech. Just a murderer's row of the Big 12 kind of power players. So I think it's hard to be anything but lukewarm on this TCU team. But look, if the Big 12 is one of those situations this year where there's 9 teams in the mix, with 2 weeks left to go and there's 85 different scenarios on who could get to the Big 12 championship game, would it shock me if TCU is one of those 9 teams? No. Do I think that they've got the roster or the quarterback or dynamic difference makers on this team to really separate themselves and put themselves in that category with Texas Tech, Utah, BYU? Probably not, but I think we're probably looking at a 7-5, 8-4, 9-3 type of bowl team, just a solid, tough out, Sonny Dykes TCU team. So let's move on. All right, UCF should be interesting this year. Another team that has a lot of roster turnover. They're 122nd in Phil Steele's homegrown production returning. So they've got a lot of transfer portal talent coming in, and the most important piece of that is Alonzo Barnett, the quarterback from James Madison last year, who took the Dukes to the college football playoff. He's got 49 passing TDs. He's got 5,400 career passing yards. I think you pair him with a coach like Scott Frost, and UCF could be interesting this year. A lot of questions, obviously, like I mentioned, turnover throughout the roster, but they've got a quarterback and they've got a coach who has performed at this school before, and UCF could be a player. Wouldn't shock me if they're near the bottom. Wouldn't shock me if they're near the top come the end of the season, but that's where I think we're at on UCF. Marsh, what do you think about Kansas State, who's kind of here in the same middle tier of the Big 12?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost with Kansas State, Avery Johnson, probably best hair in the Big 12. Very Samson-like. I think that's where he gets all of his strength. But Colin Klein, first year as head coach, I like it. K-State legend returning. He's made some stops along the way. He was at Texas A&M. He's got that modern offensive mindset and coming back to his roots. I love it. I'm kind of rooting for them to an extent, just based on that whole scenario. And Avery Johnson feels like he's been there for 25 years and nothing like long, flowy blonde locks at the quarterback position. So I hope they do well. I think experience of the QB room will maybe steal 1 or 2 games, and I'm interested to see what Colin Klein does at his alma mater. But we'll have to see. Continuity obviously is not a strong suit for them given some of the losses that they've had. So it'll be interesting to see how they overcome that.
Sure. Also in this middle tier, we got year 2 of Rich Rodriguez back in Morgantown, West Virginia with the Mountaineers. Ryan, you've got some familiarity. So it's crazy how many different like kind of weird connectivity ties there
Boomerangs.
are between like Michigan and the Big 12, some of these Big 12 teams. But what do you got on West Virginia this year?
Well, Casey, it all leads back to one place right there, the Block M. I like this team. Do I think they're going to be great? I don't. But who I really like on West Virginia, who I think Rich Rod is going to absolutely run into the ground, is the transfer from Jacksonville State, Cam Cook. He rushed for almost 1,700 yards last year. I think he had 10 games where he rushed for over 100 yards. He's the exact type of guy that they've been missing at West Virginia. And I think that is what they're going to pound the rock. That's what Rich Rod likes to do. Quarterback, Michael Hawkins Jr. is a bit of a dual threat. It seems like he's going to be the guy they're going to lean on, which again, fits right in with Rich Rod. And looking at their schedule, I had to look at it about 10 fucking times because I go, where's Pitt? I thought they brought this back. Am I crazy? Are they doing every other year? Did they not play last year? Like, what's going on with that?
They played the last couple years, but it's not. Yeah, I don't know that it's an automatic every year anymore now. So
that was the most disappointing thing. I just was like, what the fuck? That is such a great rivalry. The time of year, playing it early like that too. It's at a time of year where you don't get a bunch of great rivalries. At least, that's where they played it last year. So that really pissed me off, especially Pitt and West Virginia. It's not like they're competing for national championships and that game is keeping one of them out of the playoff every year or something. It's a great game. It's a fun game. It's one of the best, like, most hateful rivalries in college sports. So just disappointing.
Yep. And look, I mean, I agree with you. The backyard brawl is a very underrated rivalry, like the Holy War. But I will say that if you're gonna not play Pitt and you're not gonna do the backyard brawl, they replace that game with what looks like to be a matchup with Virginia, who is probably a little bit better in a little bit better place as an ACC program right now. Virginia, West Virginia. I don't recall these two programs ever lining up to play, but they're going to go down to North Carolina for some reason and play this game in Charlotte on a neutral field in week 3. But yeah, I mean, look, would much rather see, Panthers, Mountaineers in either Morgantown or Steelers Stadium up there in Pittsburgh. Let's move on and hit these last 6 teams. Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you here first. Touch on the Baylor Bears. This is obviously a pivotal year for Dave Aranda and brought in an interesting quarterback to try to offer a spark to the program. But what do you see for Baylor this year?
Yeah, I mean, the air raid offense with DJ Lagway should be an experiment. We'll see how it goes. Lagway had 16 touchdown passes and 14 interceptions last year at Florida. So not the most eye-popping stats to be the man at the helm for the air raid offense. But they do have a couple decent weapons. They got Louis Brown, I think Louis Brown the 5th, and then Gavin Freeman. Good receivers. Do I think that Dave Aranda, DJ Lagway is the combination that is going to get Baylor back to being a competitive top end of the Big 12 team? I personally do not, but it's fun. I will say that. I think it's definitely like if you're going to be at the bottom of the Big 12, I think that is not the worst thing you could do is just, bring in a talented quarterback that if things do go right, he does have big upside, and he has the talent to beat anyone. So that is where I'm looking most at Baylor. How does this QB experiment work with Lagway?
Yep. Marsh, one team that it's really hard to find too much to be, overly optimistic about is the Cincinnati Bearcats, one of our local Central Ohio, Southwest Ohio teams that all three of us kind of grew up near that program. But what are you seeing for the Bearcats in 2026?
Yeah, when we were growing up, Brian Kelly was at Cincinnati, which is kind of weird to think about. But yeah, I mean, listen, they bring nobody back. They're 129th in percent of offensive yards returning in the bottom tier of everything as far as experience coming back. Obviously, the Brandon Sorsby saga. I mean, you're in the media for all the wrong reasons. And then we get to Scott Satterfield. What has Scott Satterfield done? Is what I want to know. The guy was at App State, did a great job. Okay, sweet. You did well in the Sun Belt. You came to Louisville in 2019. You won Coach of the Year for a 6-win turnaround. It was your first year there. It was prior to NIL. There were no recruits from your end, really. So you did that with somebody else's team and then proceeded to immediately shit the bed and win 4 games, 6 games, 7 games, 3 games, 5, 7 between Louisville and Cincinnati. I'm confused how this guy has a job. And frankly, Cincinnati is just completely irrelevant unless we want to look up Brandon Sorsby highlights and see him in the Bearcat black and red. So listen, bottom dwellers, I wouldn't be shocked. They went 7-6 last year, a little bit of an uptick from the previous 3 and 5 win seasons, but I don't see this team winning more than 5-6 games this year. Satterfield gets fired and Cincinnati's back to square one.
Yep. I think Ryan and I probably have very similar sentiments on the Bearcats, but you summed them up well, and I don't think we need to dive too deep into a team that we're all lukewarm at best on with the Bearcats. But I'm going to take over for the Kansas Jayhawks here. Look, I think there's some reason for optimism. You still have Lance Leipold. He's still viewed as one of the most respected kind of program stabilizers, builders in all of Power 4 conference or Power 4 conference football. So Leipold should at least put a reasonable floor in for Kansas. They've had back-to-back 5 and 7 seasons after a pretty strong 9 and 4 campaign back in 22-23. They are going to be without Jalen Daniels for the first time in what seems like since 2004. So Jalen Daniels is gone. It'll be either Cole Ballard or Isaiah Marshall taking over, or a combination of the two of them. Cole Ballard, more of a prototypical pocket passer, a little bit less dynamic. Isaiah Marshall, a lot more dynamic and more of a dual threat quarterback. So will be interesting to see kind of how that quarterback situation plays out. And Andy Koldenecki coming back from Penn State. That's when 22-23 was his last season with Kansas. They went 9 and 4, made a pretty good run with Jalen Daniels and Devin Neal in that Kansas Jayhawk team. But he's been at Penn State the last couple of years, was part of the kind of the whole staff dismissal with James Franklin last year. And Penn State has been mediocre at best offensively under Koldenecki. So, maybe he's one of those coaches that just seems to do, be able to do more with less at a program like Kansas versus, having the kind of weapons that he had at his disposal up in Happy Valley with the Nittany Lions. But yeah, look, Kansas, another team that, could they play spoiler and pull off an upset late October, mid-November and beat a team they're not supposed to? Sure, but can they consistently win against some of the better teams in this league? I don't think so. They just don't have the talent on this roster. But let's move on to the last 3 teams that are all interesting for a variety of different reasons, but we'll dive right in. March, one of the teams here in the bottom 3 of the league in terms of odds and just general outlook for the 2026 season is the Colorado Buffaloes, still led by primetime Deion Sanders. What are you seeing and what are you reading in regards to what Colorado can be and do in the 2026 season with Deion?
Yeah, so Colorado, listen, what a shit show Deion has here. You had Jordan Seaton, who was a 5-star offensive line. He was the best offensive line recruit, committed to Colorado, goes for a year, immediately bails for LSU. You bring in Julian Lewis. The guy does a live announcement of his commitment to Colorado on Pat McAfee, 5-star recruit. We later find out, as recent as this week, filming this in July, that the dude never watched film in high school as a quarterback. I mean, just complete moron, just relying on his talent. Somehow a 5-star, obviously very talented kid. And then he goes, Dion obviously asks no questions about whether he watched this film or not, just says, "Hey, man, you look good. I see you like watches. Come to Colorado. We're going to make you a star." Except we won 1 game in the conference last year and 3 games overall. I think the Dion experiment is over. The prime sunglasses, all that cool shit, all the flair, all the flash. It was nothing but a flash in the pan. And Dion is walking away with 1 foot, and this looks ugly.
Ryan, you and I have both, spent some time talking about, what our counterpart, our foe in the Big Ten, Penn State, could be under Matt Campbell. He did a phenomenal job at Iowa State, but obviously now gone at Penn State and took a lot of that roster with him. But what are you seeing with the Cyclones this year?
Yeah, it's obviously a roster that got completely gutted. I would like to see almost some sort of rule where if you leave like that, you can't just gut the team you're leaving. It just sucks. But that being said, Jimmy Rogers is coming in. I think he is honestly a pretty good replacement overall for Matt Campbell. He won a national championship at South Dakota State. He was at Washington State just for 1 year, right? Just last year, which he,
yeah,
6 in 6 years, so it was nothing special. But he played Ole Miss very tough, played Virginia tough. That was another roster that was somewhat gutted. So a guy that is somewhat suited for the situation, taking over a team that's not in a great position. They brought in the quarterback from Arkansas State, Jalen Raynor. He's pretty good. I actually watched him play a few times last year. Decent rusher, threw for 300 yards, I think like 4 times last year. So pretty good play overall. So I think a lot will lie on how well he can play this year. But overall, for the situation that Campbell left them in, I don't actually hate how they landed and where they're at now. I was looking at their schedule, and they play at Iowa, which is always a great rivalry. And then they do have Utah, and BYU, but they end, I think, with a very decent stretch where Arizona, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Cincinnati, UCF, Kansas State. That's about as good of a stretch I think you can end the season on in the Big 12. So I would think that the goal for them this year shouldn't be to be great or anything. I think it should just be to build and get better as the season goes on, and hopefully get some of those wins at the end of the year.
Yeah, good point. That's a really good summary on Iowa State. It's really hard to tell exactly what they're going to be, but like you said, Jimmy Rogers, he's done this with a high or insane roster turnover situation last season with Washington State and Iowa State. There's just something about that logo, that brand. They're an overachieving program. It seems like they brought in the perfect overachieving replacement coach for Matt Campbell. And another team that kind of falls into that category of just a total rebuild is the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Let's take a trip down to Stillwater, Oklahoma. This is basically North Texas North now. Eric Morris comes in from North Texas, and he brings all of North Texas's most important pieces from their AAC championship participant team last year to Stillwater. They bring in Drew Messemaker. They bring in the running back Caleb Hawkins. They bring in the wide receiver Wyatt Young and Chris Barnes. Oklahoma State, like on their own website, they talk about how they have 62 transfers and the number 7 ranked transfer portal class in the country. So to me, this is a program that desperately needed a shot in the arm and a rejuvenation. Mike Gundy went out like a wet fart. 1-11 last year. And I watched some of their game against Oregon. I think I even have a video on Instagram where I talk about how Oregon is going to beat them by 50, and that's exactly what they did. Final score in that game was 69-3. Oklahoma State is not a program that should be getting beat 69-3 by pretty much anyone, right? I mean, 69-3 is what, bad FCS schools come in and lose to Oregon by. So Oklahoma State has way too much tradition, history, pride to be losing to the Oregon Ducks 69-3. This is not an Oklahoma State team that is going to lose like that. Now, if they play that Oregon team again, would it be like 42-17? Sure, but it'd be a respectable football score between two competitive programs. And that's what Eric Morris and Drew Mestemaker and this North Texas infusion into the Oklahoma State program is going to provide is reasonable competitiveness again. And that's a giant step forward than 1-11 and 66-point beatdowns to the Oregon Ducks last year.
Yeah, I think just another point on that too, right, is it's an interesting concept because in the NIL era and the coaches moving, going to different programs, we've seen a handful of players come with in a lot of instances. This is literally a copy and paste of North Texas to Oklahoma State.
100%.
This is North Texas 2.0. How does it work? I mean, if they go from, one win or whatever it was to 6-7 wins, you're going to have, it's going to be kind of like they referred to in the NFL of a copycat league, right? Like you're going to have these other schools and these other programs that are thinking, hey, this guy was an unreal coach at a small school. There's guys there too that have NFL traits like Drew Mestemaker, who's the prototypical NFL quarterback build, arm strength, arm talent. He's 6'4", 215 pounds, whatever it is. And it's like, maybe we can do that too, especially in the NIL era where you can pull all these kids with them and there's no sitting out. There's no real penalties to it. So I'm really interested in Oklahoma State to see how that pans out. And if there's success there, who thinks they can kind of do the copy and paste themselves?
One quick point I have to add on Oklahoma State, and it's very quick, and it's Eric Morris last year at North Texas matched up with Jimmy Rogers at Washington State, and he beat him 59-10. North Texas beat Washington State. So that's just the bottom tier matchup of coaches that played last year coming into the Big 12, and it was a very lopsided win for Eric Morris against Jimmy Rogers.
Yeah, Jimmy Rogers still got a job. That's interesting.
North Texas was a really good team last year. They lost the AAC championship to Tulane, but a very competitive game, and they had a really bad game against USF. But USF, they beat the Gators and Boise State, and USF was a very respectable team last year too. But yeah, look, I mean, we'll find out early. North Texas, or I'm sorry, I might as well call it North Texas. Oklahoma State will host the Oregon Ducks, who will come in almost assuredly as a top 5 team. They'll come to Stillwater, make the return trip from the basically bye game that they got last year, and they'll come in and play week 2, September 12th against the new look Oklahoma State Cowboys. All right, well, that is we hit on everyone. Obviously, we're a little top heavy talking about the major players and major competitors for the Big 12 championship at the top of the show, but we're going to go into our picks now for the Big 12. We're going to give our pick for the championship and the odds. We're going to give our pick for most outstanding player, even though there's not really odds out there yet right now for most outstanding player in the Big 12. There may be by the time we release this, but we'll give our most outstanding player pick, and then we will give our favorite regular season win total over under in the Big 12. I'll go ahead and lead us off. I hinted at taking Arizona at 18-1. I think I'm going to back off of that now, and I'm going to take Houston at 16-1. I'm looking at the DraftKings odds as of today, and I'm going to take Houston 16-1 to get over the hump with Willie Fritz, with Connor Wegman, with the talent they have coming back there in H-Town. I'll take the Houston Cougars to be your 2026 Big 12 champions. Ryan, who do you got for the Big 12 championship?
I'm going Utah at plus 650 for the Big 12 championship. I don't love it, but at the end of the day, it came down to my belief in Dampier, and that is where I fell. I think that he's going to be the difference against BYU, and I'm taking them at 650 over Tech at even money for sure.
Marsh, who's your champion of the Big 12 this year?
It's the BYU Super Soakers. Give me BYU all day. Give me LJ Martin on top of it, player of the year. Now, if I had to pick a flyer pick off the chalk, I would probably go with Amari Thomas. Just get real crazy with it. If I was looking for juicy odds, but I just think LJ Martin, Bear Bachmeyer, BYU, Kalani Sitake, Super Soaker Nation. We're going to get it done. Give me the BYU Cougs, Big 12 champion, college football playoff representative, and maybe make some noise depending on Bear Bachmeyer's growth and from year 1 to year 2.
Love it. Ryan, who's your player of the year?
My player of the year, man, I don't want to go Dampier because I don't truly believe that. So I'm going to go Noah Fafita. I feel like that's chalkish, but that's where I'm going to go. I think he gets it done. I think if I'm gonna have to bet on someone for player of the year in the Big 12, he's going to be my choice.
I think Noah Fafita will probably have some decent odds. I mean, it won't be it won't be LJ Martin chalk. Let's put it that way.
No, I'm taking Noah Fafita as well. I think with Arizona and Brett Brennan, I think he's got an opportunity to have a really special season. For some reason, there's just something about their schedule, the makeup of the team that I just can't get quite there to pick them as a champion of the Big 12. But I do love Noah Fafita, and I do think that they've got enough around him to give him where he's not just a one-man show, but also not enough to where like enough credit can go to other people. So I think he kind of threads that needle perfectly for Arizona and will be the clear runaway, put the team on his back type guy for Arizona. But they'll have enough guys that make plays here and there to help him out and make them a top half of the league type of team in the Big 12. Let's do our win totals. I'm going to short the Cincinnati Bearcats. Their win total on Hard Rock today is 5.5, and the under is -145. I don't love laying big juice like that, but I don't see anything about Cincinnati that I like outside of having a pretty solid offensive line. I don't think Scott Satterfield's a difference maker coach, and I don't think they have any difference maker players. So I'm going to take Cincinnati to go under 5.5 this year and be like a 3-9, 4-8 type of Big 12 team.
Yeah, honestly, I'm just let's ride the train, baby. BYU all day. Over 8.5 seems like an absolute lock. They played 12 games. I mean, there are 2 games on the schedule in Notre Dame and Utah that could be tricky. Outside of that, it seems like a bit of a cakewalk. So if this team is what I think it is, 10-2 is really the floor in my opinion. But could easily be an 11-1. I think 11-1 maybe beat the ceiling. I think Notre Dame probably beats BYU. So, but listen, 8.5. I mean, who are we kidding here? Give me 8.5 all day. I think BYU absolutely demolishes that win total.
Ryan, your best bet season win total in the Big 12.
I struggled between an over and an under, but I am going to stick with the under. I'm going Arizona State under 6.5 wins. I think they have a tough schedule. I think losing Levitt is going to really hurt them, and I do not like the head coach there. So I am under 6.5 wins.
All right. Well, guys, that will wrap it up for us on the Big 12 preview show on the Nard Dog Sports Show. Look, I think this is the first one we've done. We'll get a little bit more polished, a little bit more strategic, and allocate the time as we move into the other conferences a little bit better. But I hope, you guys all got to learn a little bit about some of these Big 12 teams, picked up a fun fact here and there at the very least. And Should be another wild season with a few teams that are clear favorites at the top, but not necessarily locks to be there in the Big 12 championship game come first week of December in the college football season. So Ryan, Max, appreciate your time, and we'll see you guys next time on the ACC, SEC, and Big Ten preview shows. Peace.
Flip.
That's the show, now you know. This is how the real ones roll. Big thanks, good night, see you down the road on the Nard Dog Sports Show.